the Governance Mountain, and we are privileged to present this morning. And so I will straight away get into the presentation. So my name is Michael Chizito, and by God's grace, I'm leading this particular mountain. And Christine, who was supposed to do the first 3 slides, is our secretary, Christine Nachimera. And then Rachel, who just led us together with Grace in prayer. Rachel is our publicity. So the rest, of course, are members who've been active. Isaac is part of the group and is also moderating today. So without further ado, this mountain, as many of us know, the enemy on this mountain are the Gigashites, who are clay dwellers, and they focus on earthly things, mainly with a strong belief in corruption. And they are a group of descendants of Ham and Canaan, as we read in the Bible in Genesis 10 and verse 16, and also from 1 Chronicles 1, verse 14. Now, the Gigahites were strong allies of the Hittites, and so the media, that is, the Hittites, generally the enemies are the Hittites, and so they would effectively manipulate the people. And as we see, I think you've probably heard several times how, people have commented on who rules or who governs what should come out on the big news channels, and of course, I've also noted over the years that when you watch the BBCs, the Al Jazeera, the CNNs of this world, they always show the wrong things about Africa, the starving children and everything. They never show the good things, And some people actually, after they come and see for themselves, then they see, what is happening? We have this bad understanding of Africa. No wonder they refer to us as the dark continent. So, yeah, these Gigahites have those strong allies in there, and they take over. They take over the governance of everything. So the earthly tabernacles are temporary, as we also read from 2 Corinthians 5, verse 1 and 2, verse 1, and then 2 Corinthians verse 4 and 18. And of course, when we talk about being temporary, these people will not do this for a long time. And just like many of you probably are aware, there's been many prophecies of the fact that Africa is now our time. So some of these things do not last forever. And so we know that the Lord is fighting for us, but we need to also do our part. So this is the reason. I think that's why many of you have taken up the different mountains and want to do your part. So just to read 2 Corinthians 4 and verse 18, it says, "So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." So we might not see some of these things clearly, and probably many of you are complaining and saying, why are these things happening? Lord, why are you letting this happen? But He's working behind the scenes. Even when we don't feel it, He's working. Even when we do not see it, He's working. And so He remains sovereign. So what are the main characteristics of this particular mountain? There are 2 generally, and that's pride and manipulation. And of course, as Grace was praying, she was praying about some of the things. There's a lot of manipulation, especially at the top, and so on. And of course, when we also get into power, just like they say, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So if you're not careful and try to work on our humility, then of course we can get taken up by the enemy. So of course, we see also that these Gigahites were displaced, or they are to be displaced by the Israelites, in as much as they kind of came to manipulate and with their pride, having read the fact that the unseen is eternal, of course, ultimately Israel will come back on the top. Then the principality is generally Lucifer, who manifests himself in pride and manipulation, just like we've seen. And if some of you have read that book by Johnny and Elizabeth Enlow, we see that the enemy is planning to weaken nations so that they can drink their own judgment. And of course, there's a reference to that story of Abel and Cain. And of course, we know what happened there. Cain killed his brother because he did not do well. And of course, we've seen all this happening. When you try to do well, yeah, you are blackmailed, there's a lot of negative energy that is put in against you, and sometimes you get pushed out because you're standing on the right word. So we are saying that only 3% of the Christians in church, of course, can translate into government positions, and therefore this is also some call to us. If you are in some of those positions at the top, because government almost drives literally everything. So if you're among the 3%, then it's time to ask yourself, Lord, why did the Lord put you there? And are you playing your role in trying to take that mountain? So reading from Proverbs 29:2, we also need the right people to get into authority. So if we get the right people into authority, then of course we know that we at least are somewhere. That's the first step in everything. So Proverbs 29:2 says, when the righteous thrive, the people rejoice. When the wicked rule, the people groan. So if you're part of the 3%, think about this. Are you the right person? Will the people thrive or will they groan? So we need to displace everyone who weakens the church and take over our authority as the church. Now, how can the enemy and its principality be displaced? So we have 4 points here that we think would contribute to displacing the enemy. And the first one is prayer. And in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 2, rather chapter 2, verse 1 to 2, which says, I urge then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, intercession, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peacefully and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. So we are urged to pray for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives. So I'm sure everyone wants to live a peaceful and quiet life. And of course, we know what's happening right now in Sudan, which is not good. Probably some of you had relatives or friends who are trapped there, and how they left, was also not easy. At least I heard of a story of one relative of a friend who explained how he left Sudan, but rather Khartoum, it was not an easy thing. So we need to pray that we'll live for the kings and those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives. And then we need to practice the following. Remember that Lucifer himself is on top of this mountain, and he manifests in pride and manipulation. So we need to pray for humility, or practice humility, just like we read in Hebrews 3 and verse 1. Hebrews 3 and verse 1, which says, therefore, holy brothers and sisters who share in the heavenly calling, fix your thoughts on Jesus, whom we acknowledge as our apostle and high priest. So if we focus on Jesus, whom we acknowledge as our apostle and high priest, then he will teach us humility. And then we need to be honest. We need to be honest. We need to be people of integrity. and above all, be ready to serve. Probably we know, or many of you have probably been to offices where you meet people and, they don't care. They don't care really. And so for me, what goes on in my mind is, okay, lately I'm like, is that how I also behave, Because sometimes we also get what we give the others. So I always ask God to help me do my best where I am blessed. And then, of course, the other thought that comes to mind is, imagine, this person woke up so early to come and work, but they failed to serve. So are we ready to serve? So we need to practice humility, practice honesty, integrity, and be ready to serve. And of course, when we're exemplary, people will then want to come to us. And many times people say, if that's how Christians behave, then I also won't get saved. So are we being exemplary as Christians? Then the other way is to prepare ourselves, for example, like Nehemiah, when he was rebuilding the wall, he ignored the rumors. And so he said, I'm going to work while praying, and he was alert. And of course, you remember some people were working, one had a bow and arrow, a weapon in one hand, and then using the other hand to work. Of course, it was a hard one, I can imagine, because if you have two hands, one is holding the other. And of course, if you're builders, we've seen people building, need your hands, but he was determined. So are we determined also to, take up the principality that's on top of this mountain? Then we need wisdom. We need wisdom going forward, doing what has to be done. So James talks about wisdom in James chapter 3, verse 13 to 18. I'll read through that. And it says, who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. So I think that has been self-explanatory. So we need to seek the right wisdom from God. And then finally, among the so many things, we need to focus on what glorifies God. So do not focus on what can be seen by earthly eyes, because we shall miss God's voice. And we need to, therefore, focus on God and not our personal agendas. Now, straight away move into the national outlook. And of course, it's clear that there's a lot of prevalence of corruption in our country. And corruption is generally the impairment of integrity or virtue or morality. People don't care anymore. Sometimes when you confront some and tell them, but surely, what are you doing? They're bold enough to tell you, do I eat at your house? They normally say it in my local language, Ndiawo, So it's such a terrible thing and it's become acceptable. But of course, that's the reason we're here. We as intercessors, our role is to pray and let God do. And like we've read in the verses, that the unseen things, are happening. God is at work behind the scenes. And then, of course, we have also seen this manipulation and pride quite evident in politics at all levels, right from, the LC ones up to the top, the MPs. We see what happens. And of course, some of you who have a little bit of detail about that, you know what goes on in those circles. So there's a lot of manipulation and of course pride. And in government, the civil servants. And like Grace was praying, some of the young people are like, if I just get a government job, I'll make it in a few years. So they think we have kind of set the wrong example. And so may the Lord help us. change. And of course, now, ever since we stood for, put up our stand against homosexuality was clear, there's now this issue of threat from the donors we shall not support. I just saw a letter, which probably some of you have also seen from PEPFAR. They are going to stop supporting, whatever they've been supporting. But I think this is also a time to look up to God. So as I continue to look at the regional and global outlook, I just want to highlight these points here, that when Lucifer, the principality on this mountain, is rooted in a nation, that nation manifests the following. There is always a desire to destroy Israel, and then there is working to destroy the next generation. And of course, those are seen in things like abortion, in wars, and plagues, and then working to destroy Christians. And then there's also working to suppress women or release Jezebels, and then working to pervert sexual mores. And that includes the homosexuality, adultery, and so on. So with that background, of course, when we look at the regional outlook, of course, corruption is evident in the region, East Africa, and generally Africa. And then when we talked about, the previous point of working towards destroying the next generation through abortion, wars, and plagues, we see that there are unending wars in parts of Africa. Now there's one that just recently came up in Sudan, but there's been war on and off just here at our neighbors in the Congo, DR Congo, and in the Central African Republic, in the Darfur region of Sudan. So those unending wars, we see the enemy still trying to take up the mountain. And then there's a lot of persecution of Christians as well in some African nations, to name a few: Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Burkina Faso. And of course, in many of these places, Christians live practically in ghettos and practice their faith underground. So we actually should be thankful to God that we are able to pray and, freely without any trouble. But that's a bit of the regional outlook. And then for the global outlook, no doubt corruption is on top there, okay? And much as the corruption looks smart, you talk to certain people and you tell them, your country is not corrupt if you compare it to ours. But then when they begin to tell you what's happening, then you realize, okay, they're just doing it smart in quotes, but there is also a lot of corruption. Then, of course, we have seen the anti-Semitism that is happening, people or different countries that are against Israel, God's firstborn. So that is what is happening there. And then we're seeing the destruction of the next generation also evident. Some countries have legalized like laws on abortion. And of course, they engineer wars, in some of these developing countries because they want to meet their selfish ends. And needless to say, we saw what happened 3 years ago, COVID was brought and the damage it caused, and then persecution of Christians in some countries. I think many of you, of course, are aware of how, especially in Islamic states, there are so many underground churches because they are being persecuted. And we're also aware that if you get born again in an Islamic family, you normally are thrown out. And then, of course, there's suppression also, majorly in the Islamic nations or cultures, suppression of women, not allowing them to, be able to benefit. And yet we are all made in God's image, both man and woman. And then the perversion of sexual mores. Homosexuality is on the rise, and you've heard of transgender and everything, adultery, people just choosing to divorce anytime they want and everything in different nations. So that is briefly the global outlook. And then going back to our immediate steps now that we did after we kind of understood that mountain, we have so far had 12 meetings, and half of those have been mentorship sessions. And we started by, of course, trying to understand this mountain, identifying the biblical reference, and we saw that the gigahertz, and then who is on this mountain, the principality, Lucifer himself, manifesting himself in pride and manipulation. So the first action point was for members to do a SWOT, individual SWOT, and then an organizational SWOT of the places where they work. So after that, we resolved that we need capacity building in order to become better leaders or effective leaders. So we looked around for someone who would facilitate that. And of course, through the guidance of the AKBF leadership, we got through to Patrick Mugenyi, who maybe many of you have listened to still on this platform. And so he took us through some few sessions, and then the next sessions were for each of us to share, based on what he gave us some, assignment. So we did share, and he gave feedback. And I must say, people are geared to work and ready to move on. So some of the things we agreed upon, midterm targets, after we presented or after the mentorship sessions, we members were encouraged to begin prayer altars at their workplaces. And of course, it can be scary, but they are encouraged. If you're one, just continue praying. The Lord will help you go through that. And of course, we had testimonies from some people in the group who started alone, then they were joined by others, and they saw God really working. Then we also encouraged to carry out prayer walks, also to, take charge of the place, because there's power in those. And then people who have not done prayer school were urged to go for prayer school, because it also helps you learn a lot of things on this journey. And then we also agreed to have accountability partners. So since we're an even number, we started off with accountability pairs. Now for the broader goal, or more like our end game, we're working, all this we want to do is to enable us become more humble, practice humility and spiritual authority, which is required to take this mountain. And of course, we need to also be reminded that if you are attempting to climb this mountain of government, then you need to understand who is ruling and what he's looking to perform. So when you're aware of that, then whatever you see, you do not just say maybe it happened by luck, or maybe that's what God wanted. At least you are aware. So we want to make sure that we are aware of all the things. At the end of the day, of course, like they say, Rome was not built in one day. We cannot get to know it immediately, but with time, as we support each other in the accountability partners, and there's so many things we're trying to work on, as we pray the prayer walks, the Lord will show us what it is that we need to do in order to climb this mountain. And of course, we also need to know that we can't do this in our own strength, and just have to trust that the displacement of this principality, Lucifer himself, is guaranteed by God, that nation by nation will steadily be pulled out of his clutches. So I think this is also a time when, as Uganda, we need to be bold. I liked what the president was saying when he said, yeah, so you people, this is the time when we need to sacrifice, They're saying they're going to, stop giving us some funding. So he was telling, I think, the MPs that be ready to reduce on some of your earnings and everything. And I think it happened in COVID, where there are salary cuts here and there, so that people could survive. So I think it's a good starting point, so that we shall get off that dependency syndrome. As Uganda, we are really a food basket. We have all the good things that can help us be self-sustaining, but we've been so much dependent on other people. So I think this is the time the Lord is speaking to us, and let's pray that he'll enable us stand, and of course, be able to sacrifice, because nothing comes easily. And then think about a long-term strategy as well that will enable us to achieve the broader goal or our end game. So on to the challenges and possible solutions. One of the challenges is and I think it has been a common thread throughout most of the mountains. We are 49 members in the group, but about 14, 16 are active. So we pray that the other members will wake up to the call And then the members in the different parts, they are members, part of the group, who are in different parts of the world. And so there's that issue of the time zones. They would like to join in, but sometimes by the time they wake up, we've already finished, and so on. So may the Lord help them adjust their program. And then there's the inability to choose what to focus on from a lot of things. So during the mentorship sessions, we're sharing based on what we're asked to kind of do research on. And it appeared that some members had a couple of things. I want to focus on this, I want to focus on this, I want to focus on this. So we're encouraged to pick one thing and follow that and do it well, rather than, trying to have a couple of things and you end up being inefficient. Then the issue to do with the next steps. So we'll continue meeting as accountability pairs. Like I said, since we are between 14 and 16, an even number, there are two people who have been assigned. So they'll keep praying and supporting each other. And then we'll also continue with the prayer altars at work, and also prayer walks around critical government structures, and also at our workplaces, because I think it also starts with us at also our workplaces. So you do prayer walks and also the prayer altars, and listen into what the Lord is saying. Maybe just give a quick testimony. There was one of the people in our groups who said they spoke to their bosses and they allowed them actually to, to set up a prayer breakfast annually. And in as much as their bosses are not really saved, born again, they accepted, and this has become an annual event. And the person has been given the power to take over. They choose who to come and what to do, and they've been praying. So we believe that with these continued prayer altars and everything, we shall see change coming in. And of course, whatever she contributes or she says is taken also as something important. So they listen. And so that is one way of one testimony that we've seen God at work. And then we shall meet fortnightly as a group to share and update each other on the progress of some of the things, the praying in accountability pairs, and then the prayer altars and the prayer walks, to see what the Lord has done. So that is it. I want to thank you so much, and over to you, Isaac. Isaac, back to you.
Thank you, Michael. I could not admit myself. The host had blocked unmuting. Thank you so much, Michael, for that powerful presentation. I would like to encourage all the participants to just show a vote of thanks digitally using the reactions, or post the emoji in the chat to show your gratitude to Michael for the presentation. I'm going to open up the discussion to members of the governance group to just share some additional information or highlights or testimonies from what Michael has shared. I'll just start. One of the biggest takeaways from me as we were doing the weekly mentorship sessions with Patrick Mangeni was the discovery that the governance mountain is quite important to every other mountain. And this is how he explained it. He gave us a story of the Congo and how there is no structure of governance in Congo. Every small militia leads a small area. So imagine you have to move between, say, Kampala and Wakiso. So there's the different security system, different leadership, in Kampala. And as you enter in Wakiso, you have to pay the militia and the leaders in that particular area. And he showed us that when governance is not present, there is utter chaos. And as we can see from the world events, this is exactly what the enemy wants. He wants to institute chaos in the entire world. And if there is chaos, education cannot be existent. If there is chaos, business cannot work out. If there is chaos, family cannot stand. If there is chaos, religion cannot stand. None of the others can stand if there is chaos. And from that interaction, those mentorship sessions, I realized that every sphere needs proper governance to be in place in order for them to thrive and to be successful. All right, I'll open up the floor to members. I have a question here from Josh as the members prepare themselves. Josh K says, thank you so much, Governance Mountains members. Question, how can we strategically influence existing parliament towards our intentions? That's a question from Josh. Michael, if you can unmute and answer. But one of the things that Michael said in his presentations is the need for preparation, because it's been a bit of a shock for many that even when Christians get into the parliament, because they are not well prepared, they find themselves in, for lack of a better illustration, like a deer in headlamps. All of a sudden, they are shocked by the value system, the culture, and they cannot quickly adopt. And one of the things that we shared, and I've been sharing with the governance members, is the Institute for National Transformation has an OXID governance course training that really prepares people to actually arise to the challenge as they get into those spheres of influence. But I'll open the floor for members who are part of the governance sphere to share or weigh in on the conversation, or if any of the participants can also share. You're most welcome. Yes, Sylvan. Your hand is up. Go ahead. Host, please allow participants to unmute. Sylvan, you can speak. Sylvan, you can unmute yourself now.
All right. Thank you so much, Isaac. Thank you, Michael. And I would like to go direct to that question of how to prepare ourselves to influence the parliament. Number one, we need to check our motives, because it's one thing to wish to prepare to influence the parliament. It's another thing to go in with the wrong motives. Like Isaac has mentioned, several have gone there and have ended up being swallowed. There's an assumption that when you present yourself in the community as a Christian, people will vote you. There's that possibility, but it's also not guaranteed, because you've not been prepared from the grassroots. You've not been interacting with people. But there's also a misconception that preparing with people in the community includes or entails what the current world system is calling for, giving handouts. But then you can appear generous and compassionate, so you can win their vote going forward. You need to know that this is going to be a long haul. You might not necessarily win the numbers at the beginning. You might never win. You might not win them in the second session. You may actually never win them. I think the attitude should be, can I be part, or can I initiate a new culture of politics right from the grassroots? And then that will influence the upper sides of politics. Yes, I am part of the OXID governance training program. We can have a conversation on that. We are completing the second cohort is graduating on the 10th of June, and the third cohort is beginning on the 1st of July. In case one is interested, we can have a conversation, but it is preparation with the right motive. We don't need to get into the community portraying ourselves as Christians with an intention of looking at money. If our intention to go in parliament or any form of politics is to earn or to make a living, then we have started on the wrong footing. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sylvan, for that very important point. The aspect of intent, and that's where character actually is formed. Stephen M.R. Covey, son of Stephen Covey, in his book Speed of Trust, talks about two critical things that form character. The first one is integrity, the second is intent, and Sylvan has spoken elaborately on that. Emi Asimwe says, thank you so much, Michael, for the presentation. Work prayer altars are very important, whether individual or group. And this is a call to all of us here on the call, on this particular call, that wherever you are, please begin prayer altars. Wherever you are, start, even if it's just you, and begin to build up the group of people who are going to be standing in the gap. Do prayer walks. We've had several testimonies on that, and members, you can share if you have some of those. We have another comment here from Amy again. She says, division and sects is one way the enemy attacks governance. And we've seen that even among Christians, this has been a big challenge, the aspect of divisions and sects, and yet we are one body in Christ. Robinson Asimwe adds and says, numbers is a big challenge, and we've seen that across all the mountains as the presentations have come in. Participation and commitment levels are not consistent with the numbers, but he says Jesus had 72, but he ended up with 12, and these turned the world upside down. Let's be encouraged. The few committed can transform the nation. Education, Pasi, I don't know if that's your name, I think it's Pasi, says humility is critical, and surprisingly, it goes hand in hand with courage or effectiveness. I'm glad that some of us are already initiating prayer breakfasts at workplace. This takes courage. Indeed, it does. And we encourage you to take the leap of faith and start them wherever you are, and pray for the leaders wherever you are, because that's what the word of God instructs us to do. For then we shall live in peace, as Michael said in his presentation. Annette Magolo says, governance team, could you deliberately plan meetings with MPs? It's an interesting question, Michael. If you can weigh in on this, that would be good, or any of the members. It could be an area of focus, as Patrick Mangenyi had talked to us. Education Passy says, yes, motive equals righteousness. It gives us the spiritual authority to operate as rulers and kings in our spheres, i.e. to be of influence and have any form of impact. Thank you for that. Alan Basamu says, grassroots. This is a must and must be done. Alan Balum, maybe you could add to some clarity to this. What are you feeling about grassroots? You can unmute and just share more on that. Alan Balam.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Good morning, Michael. Thank you so much for representing the governance mountain very well. The issue of grassroots that I'm raising is that, just like some other members have mentioned it, the grassroots form the base. If you look at most of the people who come into leadership, they come through the ballot, and it's the ordinary person, the lower society tier, that gets involved in the voting, and all those people are found in the grassroots. Normally, people who come into leadership through the vote are very powerful, whether you like them or not. Once somebody goes through the vote, they are very powerful. They have opportunities to do many things, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And most of the times, we find that Christians do not pay attention to this. Christians are looking at MPs, Christians are looking at mayors, they're not looking at LC1s, they're looking at LC2s, they're looking at councillors. It's evident right now, for example, in Kampala and Wakiso, that Muslims have taken it upon themselves to position themselves for any of the grassroots positions. And you've seen it in recent elections. All the posters have Hajati, Haji, whatever, you know. Christians have not paid attention to that, and that's part of the problem. If you cannot go through the grassroots, it's going to be very difficult to make impact on the governance mountain. So that's what I was trying to put across. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you very much,
Also,
Alan.
I'm a leader at the grassroots, and I lead Nalia. I'm a LC1, so I know what I'm talking about.
Thank you very much, Alan, for that. Actually, one of us, actually, I think it's you, Alan, who is on the governance sphere in the grassroots. And one of the things that in the governance course I talked about that is being facilitated by the Institute for National Transformation, there is a lot of emphasis on that. And what we focus on is, and I'll just give two examples. The first one is Mindset Change for Community Transformation, which is a book by Bishop Titus Masika, and he talks about the fact that to be able to change mindsets, you need to start with the people themselves, the people at the grassroots, that Anna said, and begin to show them the kingdom mindset. And those people are the ones who then will transform their communities. The second one is the autobiography of the current premier or president of China, who talks about, who illustrates the fact that the Chinese system is structured in such a way that for you to become president, you must first have come from LC1 all the way up the ladder to president. And that's how they've been able to create a very effective system of governance that has moved over 300,000 people out of poverty as of 2020 or 2019, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done with the LC1s and governance team. I think probably that is might be a way God is speaking to us, that we need to find ways to begin working with those people, transfer to them some of the kingdom mindsets, avail them to opportunities for mentorship and training, and empower them. And Joy is confirming this by saying integrity and intent is indeed part of what character is. And she says, consider training lower cadres too. Some low leaders like LC1 as such are pain to the community. Like Alan said, they're actually very powerful people. One of our facilitators in the Oxid governance course, Eva, talks about the structure of our country's governance system. And if you understand it, you realize that a lot of what should be happening in our communities is actually anchored on that LC1 level. But because it's not being effectively implemented in this nation, we are not seeing what we need to see. All right. Any comment, question, you can just raise your hand, post it in the chat, and give an opportunity.
Isaac?
Yes, Michael.
Yeah, I'd like to request Eva or Sarah, Eva
Okay.
Babidi or Sarah Kawale, to comment on the engaging of MPs. There was that question, could we go directly and engage the MPs?
Yes.
So
yes.
Eva or Sarah, kindly.
Yes, good morning, Eva here. About engaging MPs, I think it's something good that we can take on, but we could identify and move with, we can start with a few as we go on to meet with their fellowship, because one thing I know is that they have a fellowship. And one time I was on a WhatsApp group and attending some of their morning sessions. So it's something good that we can take on. I had already taken note of it, and I think we'll discuss further in our discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. Sarah, do you have any comment?
Thank you, Isaac, and thank you, Eva, and thank you, everybody. Actually, in that light, we have even former MPs on the governance sphere, like Honorable Benson Obuogwal, who probably would be a good mentor and a guide in terms of our approach, but I believe that's a good action point for the sphere. And we will definitely go back and discuss it and see how to approach it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members, for those suggestions. We're going to take them up and see how we can, as Patrick had said, focus in and have some impact done on one of the areas, either the MPs or the LC ones. Esther Ruth Ao says that there is a parliament altar, but I think most of the active members are ex-MPs and not sitting MPs. Oh, this is very sad. I think members, we need to take note of this. If we can find a way through Honorable Benson Obua to work with the altar at the parliament to even work with these ex-MPs to influence the current sitting MPs to be part of it, that could be a big step in the right direction. Joshua Mugabe, you have a very interesting comment here. I would like to invite you to share. Joshua Mugabe, share your comment. Is Joshua in the room?
Hello. Good morning.
Morning, Joshua.
Am I audible?
Yes, the network is a bit
Yes.
breaking. But
Yeah, I was afraid it might be patchy because I don't know if I'm audible. That's why I wrote down.
Go ahead, we can hear you.
Okay, so one of our challenges, if you look, there is a way, I forget where it is, I think it's in Ecclesiastes. There was a story given about a city that was besieged by a marauding army. And then they locked them up, and the plan was to starve them to death rather than fight. And then the story says, if someone finds it, please post it, the reference. But it says, a poor but wise man was able to give advice that saved the city. But after all of that, nobody acknowledged the poor man. And so while it is important to have wisdom and godly wisdom at that, when you don't have money, I'm paraphrasing, but we'll find it in Ecclesiastes. If I find it, I'll post it sometime. But when you don't have wealth, nobody pays attention. So my post there has just been one of the things that forces Christians to walk in there. I think it was you, Isaac, who was saying, or Michael, that when they get into the parliament as supposed Christians, or was it Sylvian, you find that they compromise, they die out completely. And it's because nobody pays attention. Yes, you're Christian and all, but people will recognize the fact that when you have the money to back you up, then nobody's going to fool around with you. Nobody is going to force you to compromise your position. And therefore, when you stand up to speak, they pay attention because they recognize you're not necessarily malleable. You can't be manipulated because your source is not, nobody's going to give you money to change your position on certain policies or laws or acts of parliament that need to be passed. Your position will be your position, righteously so. But money has a way, mammon has a way of fooling around with many people because of the lure. So that was my position, that was my contribution. So
Thank
get
you.
wealth, find a way to get either as a group or as people together.
Someone needs to be muted. They're laughing. Anthony, please mute yourself. The portion of scripture is Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 13, all the way to 16. And this is what it says. This is the illustration of wisdom I have also seen under the sun, and great it was to me. There was a little city with few men in it, and a great king came against it and besieged it and built great battlements against it. But there was found in it a poor wise man, and by his wisdom he rescued the city. Yet no man seriously remembered that poor man. But I say that wisdom is better than strength, though the poor man's wisdom is despised and his words are not heeded. Thank you, Joshua, for that contribution. I hope that we can find a way around it. Wealth is usually one of the biggest issues. And yet we as Christians have to commandeer it because we are God's stewards of his resources, and therefore we should be the best at managing and stewarding and channeling those resources for his purposes. Thank you very much, Josh, for that contribution. Dorcas adds to your comment by saying, on top of having wealth, I think the main focus should be the financial discipline. And that's what we're talking about, financial stewardship. And that's important also in governance. Thank you very much for those contributions. Thank you, Gloria, for posting the reference. Any comments? Arabat, you have a comment. Could you please speak on that? And then Annette, you can follow. Arabat, elaborate your comment.
Yeah. I hear what Josh is saying. However, the root cause is lack of contentment. If we as Christians, as believers, we can nurture contentment, I think things will change. Much as you might say money compromises, it is an uncontented soul that can easily get compromised. If you are content with the little that you have and you have principles to live by, I think the rest is history. Can we maybe in all our walks, all of us, nurture contentment within our families, at our workplaces, and not allow to be compromised, have values and principles to live by, which are Christ-centered? Life will be different. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very wise words there. The Bible says godliness and content is much gain, and great gain indeed. Annette, you have a comment that is very important for us to take note of. Could you please share?
Thank you so much, and thank you for leading us so well. My thinking is we need to somehow engage with the MPs, and the beginning or entry point would be the fellowship. They sit every Thursday. Actually, they're now in fellowship, I think up to 8, from 7 to 8. And I think it would be really important to find a way of having them on board. They may be few, but it's still important. One, they need support, they need encouragement, but we also need to hear from them. We need to be able to interact with them, and I think they would really guide us in many ways. It will guide our outlook, and I believe that fellowship would also be strengthened, because truth is, yes, the fellowship is there. The people who attend are few. Some are staff members, some are, yes, ex-MPs, some are actually not as in born again, they are Catholics. So I think if we find a way of attending or interacting with them at that level, there will be a lot that would do, and as the governance mountain, and then also as the body of Christ. Thank you.
Very, very important comment there from Annette, and team members, let's take note of it. It has been repeated now more than 3 times. It implies that it's something we need to focus in on, and it would be a great way to have valuable impact. She's shared that there are people there who need to be encouraged, and already on the mountain. They need to be encouraged, to be prayed for, and also in a way from the networks that we have, guided and provided a form of mentorship. Thank you very much, Annette, for that, and we've taken note of it. And I believe this could be an entry point for us to start having impact on this mountain. Dorcas Kwagala says, because wealth accumulates, there's a tendency of setting our hearts on this wealth. I think that's why Christ said it's very difficult for a rich man to get into heaven. Yes, indeed, godliness with content is great. Thank you, Dorcas, for confirming that. This is a very important question, and I think, Annette, you could answer this for us. Are we allowed to join them in prayer, as who are the citizens of the country and not actually MPs? Very good question, Aramat.
Thank you. The fellowship is open to everyone.
It's open
So
to everyone.
it's open to everyone. If you just go in and attend, no one would stop you. So I think if you went in there, that would guide on, it will be like an entry point. You'll get to know people, you'll know how to maybe to begin to engage with them.
Thank you, Annette, for that guidance. Would you be willing to be part of the governance course and lead this particular aspect? Don't need to now.
That I'm from the family mountain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but we can still engage. We can still have conversation and see how best this can be done.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Joshua Mugabe, very, very powerful comment. Could you please weigh in on it? Yes, Anthony, you have something you want to say?
Sorry, I'm looking for my emoji for raising my hand. I don't know my interface. I'm just also adding a very, in my opinion, very important is I think we should not much always focus on the MPs as the ones to bring solutions. You know, leadership starts from home. Charity begins at home. So I know they are such a very, very, very big part players in the affairs and the things that we are running. But the challenge is when we look up, we forget to look the inside of us. We are all politicians, either passively or actively, and this comes through the things that we do. For instance, in the governance mountain or whichever other fellowship, are we able to know, I know Sylvain talked about this, are we able to know people who have the ambition to take on these positions? Are we able to support them from the onset? You know, recommending them for mentorship, if they need certain trainings. That's how many other people like the Muslims do. Someone is mentored and trained for probably 10, 15 years before even they come into the spotlight. Are we able to do that? So that we look for the solutions inside, not really on the outside. It's very easy. Rather, it's more practical to do it from the inside. So if we are able to have these men and women who we are going to post in this, and leadership not necessarily being MP, but also in these other institutions, are we able to get those kind of people, bring them into mentorship, into trainings? If they need sponsorship, we look for people and say, you know what, we realize James really is able to do this. He needs this kind of training. How are we able to bring the resources together? I said, if we do that 5 years, 6 years, we can have a whole pool of these men and women that we can support as church. You know, oftentimes we call politics as a data game. Even someone they go into politics, we have a certain bias. Are we able to even in our local fellowship say that this is our person who is in the leadership, is LC1, thank you, Alan, he's doing a great job in Alia. Are we able to even talk about these things in our own spheres so that we are a part of a solution, not looking up to the people who are already there? They have a certain way they look at life. So that's my contribution, that we look from the inside and we start an affirmative action of brooding and mentoring all these kind of leaders. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony, for that very elaborate example and call to action. As I said in my sharing on the lessons learned, governance is not just political governance. It's governance over business, it's governance over family, it's governance over religious institutions, it's governance over arts and entertainment, it's governance over media. Therefore, there is quite a bit of work that needs to be done to prepare people to have the right intent, to have the right character, to rise to those different spheres of influence with the kingdom mindset and bring governance. For the team at the governance sphere, we have quite our work cut out for us. Now we've had some very clear pointers about what we need to focus in on. We have a contact here from Ruth. Thank you so much, Ruth, who has given us the contact of the chaplain from at the parliament. We are going to utilize that opportunity. and contact him. But also, if you know people who are in the other spheres of influence who are in very influential positions and need support, please direct them to us, and we will find ways to support them, either through availing them opportunities for training or standing with them and creating altars and praying and leading them to people who can stand with them to pray. It has been my pleasure to guide this particular session on governance. Tomorrow we have the Media Mountain that will be taking us on. I pray that what you have learned today will begin to not just think on it, but find ways to begin implementing. Remember, governance is not political governance only, but it's governance over every aspect that God has called us. I thank you very much for logging in and for staying on, and especially for those of you who have been very active. Bless you and have a blessed, wonderful day. May we share in the words of the grace. Grace.
Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit, with us all now and forevermore.
Amen.
Amen.